Hey everybody, it's Eric Papenfoos. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day. And today, Olivia, we are going to do an episode dedicated to the most famous writer ever born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It is the 100th anniversary today of the publication of his first novel called Drums. And the great Harrisburg writer is a gentleman by the name of James Boyd. Ever heard of him? Okay, very popular prior to World War II. Now, if you know the name Boyd and you're from Harrisburg, you're probably familiar with Boyd's directories. These were the sort of who's who of Harrisburg in the 1880s through the early 1920s or so. We've got some for sale at the store. That's his family. He was also related to the Herr family of Herr Street here in Harrisburg. They were coal barons. And the family amassed a lot of wealth, and Boyd was born into privilege, but he also had a strong ideological belief in the equality of the races. And I've always thought that Boyd's directory was a rather equitable city directory. No matter what race you were, or how rich or how poor, you could be in Boyd's directory. And it turns out this was deliberate, because Boyd's belief, as he stated, said, the belief that leads to democracy is this, that everyone has something sacred about them. This sacredness is held to be inherent and perpetual. No ruler, no religion, no group of men, no government is justified in violating it. It is the first principle of one's life, and nothing takes precedence over it. And that quote by Boyd is actually in the manuscript room of his alma mater at Princeton University, but it shows that he was brought up in a family that believed in equality. Now, he was born in Harrisburg Hospital. Olivia, that's where my children were born. And he went to school here, and then he went off to Princeton University and came back after being educated. He was born in 1888, came back to Harrisburg around 1910 or so. And you know what he did? He got a job teaching French at Harrisburg Academy. Now, my kids all go or went to Harrisburg Academy. And I can say that my youngest takes French. And Mr. Huey, if you're watching, we've got to do something to honor Harrisburg Academy's most famous ever French teacher, don't you think, in Boyd? Now, Boyd took a job while teaching at Harrisburg Academy, also as a freelance reporter for the Patriot News, our local newspaper, because apparently then as today, Harrisburg Academy didn't pay a whole lot of money. And he got to report on the emerging City Beautiful movement in Harrisburg, which is pretty cool. But all this came to a head when World War I hit. And Boyd went off to volunteer. He was too old to fight, but he did volunteer, and he was put in charge of the Army Ambulance Corps. And he basically got to see some of the worst fighting and the worst bloodshed in both Italy and France in World War I. And he came back a completely different and changed man. He was tired of the death and the carnage that he saw, and he resolved to write, and he moved. He couldn't go back to Harrisburg. He moved to North Carolina, where his family had invested in some land, established a bit of a rural retreat, and began writing his first novel, Drums, which came out in 1925. Now, Drums was about a war, but it wasn't about World War I, even though it really was about World War I. It was about the American Revolution. Now, come take a look at Drums, Olivia, because one of the great things about Boyd is that he got his friend N.C. Wyeth to illustrate the first illustrated edition of Drums. Now let me show you. This is the first illustrated edition. It came out and it did well, but then he got Wyeth to do the illustrations, and these are so good, these Wyeth illustrations. Wyeth, another Pennsylvanian, sent me to his friends. I want to show you this one because that's probably my favorite, because that's quintessential Wyeth. But look at that library. Look at those books. Looks a bit like this room, doesn't it? He also, there's just so many good ones. There's quintessential Wyeth, sort of plotting and talking by the fireplace. And here's one of the great John Paul Jones. There he is in military uniform looking out over the water now. Wyeth would take passages from the book and then just imagine them in illustration. So this passage was, for a long moment, Paul Jones gazed out over the crowded shipping, down the long, narrow harbor and out into the open water. And that was how Wyeth imagined it. Well, the book was very popular. Some believe, Olivia, that this is the single best book ever written about the American Revolution. It went through and sold thousands of copies. Now, you know, I'm a little partial, if you watch By Day, to the work of Kenneth Roberts, but the work of James Boyd was also very similar, very popular. Now, Drums and some of Boyd's other novels come into the shop quite regularly. Got a couple others that may interest you. Long Hunt. One interesting thing about Boyd is he was into technology, and after writing his first novel, Drums, Olivia, he got into dictating his novels. So here's a photo of him literally dictating word for word every passage of his second novel, which was a historical novel about the American Civil War. But Long Hunt is about the expansion west, and then Roll River is particularly interesting because this is his novel about growing up in Harrisburg. It's autobiographical. It's probably one of the better novels ever written about Harrisburg. There's also John O'Hara's A Rage to Live, but Roll River takes place the generation before Rage to Live, and it is about a protagonist named Clara. My daughter's named Clara. Clara, a very popular name when James Boyd was born in 1888. Roll River begins in 1880s. The scene is in the mythical Pennsylvania city, Midian, on the banks of a great river. The characters belong to the old families of the town, well-to-do, conservative, hard workers, hardy livers, lovers of good horses and healthy outdoor life, and jealous of the integrity of their social class. Clara Rand, lovely daughter of the aristocrat, and Tommy, her nephew, and it goes on to talk about Clara and Tommy, and Clara's love affair and Tommy's exploits. It is a great and interesting book, and probably one of the best books set here in our city. But that's not all about James Boyd, because what really makes James Boyd, I think, worth celebrating today, Olivia, is that he believed strongly in democracy. All of these books are on the theme of democracy, and he became very worried in the 1930s about the rising tone of fascism in American politics. He saw a portion of the American population not being afraid of Hitler and the rise of fascism in Europe, and he believed that good writers and good authors could band together to counteract that. Now, maybe this is a lesson that we need today as well, but he got his friends together. He got people like Faulkner and Fitzgerald, all of the great literary names of the day. They all respected him. They looked up to Boyd, and he would have them and host them at their home. And they decided they were going to write a series of plays dedicated to democracy to inform the public as to why fascism was wrong and why fascism was bad. And he was fortunate enough because there was a young filmmaker and playwright by the name of Orson Welles who just finished making a movie, and he was available. And Boyd got him to basically read his play on the radio. Now, I grew up listening to old-time radio, Olivia. Don't know if you've ever listened to some of those great old shows, but they chose radio as the popular medium because in 1940, radio was even more popular and more widespread than film. And Orson Welles, of course, with War of the Worlds, was the star of radio, and Boyd hired him and his company even before Citizen came out to produce one of the first plays. He called his group of playwrights the Free Company, and let's hear James Boyd, in his own words, talk about his own play from 1940.
This is James Boyd, chairman of the Free Company, speaking from New York. Today, the Free Company presents Orson Welles in his own play, His Honor the Mayor. The Free Company is a group of writers, actors, and radio workers who come together voluntarily to present a series of plays about our basic liberties. We're unpaid, unsponsored, and uncontrolled. Just a group of Americans saying what we believe about this country and about freedom, trying to say it by means of plays, just as the Bible parables or the anecdotes that Lincoln used to tell illustrate other truths by means of stories. Some of our plays deal with the whole subject of freedom, others with the different basic civil rights on which that freedom rests. Today, the theme is an ancient and fundamental democratic right, which will become clear to you as you listen to the play. This week's author is Orson Welles, and the cast is recruited from his own Mercury Theater. Most appear prominently in Mr. Welles' forthcoming motion picture, Citizen Kane, and are now to be seen on Broadway in the Mercury's new success, Native Son. We present His Honor the Mayor.
So that was James Boyd. There were many other playwrights that produced plays through the Free Company in 1940. It all comes to an end, though, of course, when we do enter the war in 1941. And Boyd is pleased with that, and pleased at least for a time. Now, once Citizen Kane comes out, of course, people like William Randolph Hearst go right after Boyd and right after Orson Welles, and McCarthy is around. He's not pleased, but it's all lost in the actual move to World War II. Now, one of the interesting things, and one of the reasons I want to do this by day, Olivia, is that Boyd mentions in that clip that we just heard that he was looking for the sort of moral clarity of stories as a means of teaching morals to a public. And he cites the parables, but this book just came in to our sort room, and this is a book, interestingly, I had no idea until just this past week, that was owned by James Boyd. Now look at this, there it is. It has his bookplate in it, and it is that's our James Boyd. There he is in North Carolina, and it shows that he organized his library by room and section and shelf. We know exactly where this book sat in the library. There's a picture of his library. Maybe the book is in it. At any rate, this is an interesting book because this is the Fables of Aesop. And I think what you can tell is that this is the very famous edition of Aesop, in which the stories, and you probably have your favorite Aesop fables, they are all sort of told, and then there's a moral and then a reflection on that moral. So the story of the fox and the crocodile tells you the moral. It says, the great boasters and liars have the fortune still some way or another to disprove themselves. And so you can see this is a book that Boyd might have used in crafting his own play, and that might have influenced him. And I think that's one of the more interesting things ever to come into the store, even though it came out of his home in North Carolina. Well, it still ended up back here in Harrisburg, his hometown. So that is the story of James Boyd on the 100th anniversary of his first novel. And we are going to end today, Olivia, with a funny book. Last week's funny book came in at the same time as this funny book. So I've had this for a week. And last week, everybody said, well, why didn't you go with this other book? It's much more funny. So we'll see if you actually laugh at this one. No connection to James Boyd, just a funny book that came in a book buying. You ready? It's Meet America. And have you ever wondered what America would look like in cuts of meat? Well, then you just haven't read Meet America, because there's New York and California. Let's go straight to Pennsylvania. There it is, the great state of Pennsylvania, James Boyd's hometown, as a cut of meat. And yes, it's an entire book devoted to pictures of all 50 states as cuts of meat. Meet America, another funny book. Well, thus ends another edition of Buy Day Friday. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll watch next Friday and every Friday at noon for more adventures in the world of books.